Hey guys, it's Chelsea from The Financial Diet, and this week's video is sponsored by Advisor.com.
And thanks to Advisor.com for supporting TFD. The TFD community loves Advisor.com, so I am thrilled to be partnering with them this year. And with the spring season finally coming, and with it a lot of spring cleaning, it is also a very good time to spring clean and rethink your finances. Because with the coming springtime arrives new opportunities to put your best foot forward when it comes to achieving financial education, as well as prioritizing your financial wellness in the long run. That's where Advisor.com comes in. Think of them as your financial accountability partner. And when it comes to your finances, it always pays to ask an expert. They can help you make your biggest money decisions so you don't feel overwhelmed. We all have that sinking feeling we're missing out on opportunities with our money, and working with a living, breathing financial advisor has historically been out of reach for those with less than 6 figures to their name, despite the fact that many of life's meaningful financial moments happen way before that kind of net worth. And the good news is you don't need to be rich to connect with an expert at Advisor.com. Having a professional guide you along your financial journey is essential, and Advisor.com provides clients with a top-notch advising team for a fixed flat annual fee. Whether you have $0 or $1 million in investments, you pay one rate for the same white glove service. Their team of advisors works for you, not for commissions, and help you to achieve your smart financial goals through planning, investing, tax strategizing, and more. Schedule a free consultation with Advisor.com today at Advisor.com and never make another financial decision alone.
And today I wanted to talk about a trend in home decor that I think is representative of larger trends in our society that are worth talking and thinking about. Now, part of it is just purely from an aesthetic place, I will admit, but I do think that this particular phenomenon has a lot of reaches outside of just what we aesthetically happen to choose to be in vogue at any given minute. And I am talking about the all-white/gray home trend, which I also sometimes think of as Airbnb chic, or the aesthetic of the TikTok real estate flipper. Now, for context, the all-white/gray interiors have been fairly dominant on places like Instagram and Pinterest for years now, although many outlets are now pretty confidently stating that this trend is out, it's over, it's already dated. Toussaint Derby, a lead designer at Havenly, said sleek all-white interiors are going to be replaced with colorful ones. She told Insider the all-white aesthetic may have felt a little too cold and impersonal, so it's falling out of favor as people try to cozy up their spaces. Now, anyone who has ever watched my videos probably knows by now that I am definitely not a minimalist or a white-on-white girly when it comes to the spaces that I live in. But it's interesting to consider that while minimalism and the white-on-gray-on-white aesthetic makes superficial aesthetic gestures to being accessible or universal, it has also long been a signifier of wealth, and a very specific type of wealth. Now, sometimes people do pick all white or neutrals due to decision fatigue or just personal taste, but all white homes have often been an aesthetic choice as a product of minimalism. And while minimalism is meant to simply be an anti-consumerist movement and a way to live with less, it has in many cases turned into aesthetic that is associated with wealth, i.e. having fewer things when you could afford to buy more is in its way conspicuous non-consumption, when you're privileged enough to be able to downsize your belongings. And rich people like Kim Kardashian, back when she was married to Kanye, and the Beckhams have shelled out fortunes to get an empty, whitewashed look, which of course influences plenty of copycats and trickles down to the everyday people who are scrolling through social media. And even when it comes to upkeep and maintenance, owning white-on-white-on-white belongings, especially if those belongings are made out of fabric, is also a signifier that you're able to maintain their upkeep and keep them looking perfect. But setting aside the aesthetics of conspicuous non-consumption, there is also another dynamic at play, as I mentioned in my intro, with the Airbnb chic. These extremely neutral and, let's be clear, often very cheaply made interiors are a way of kind of neutralizing living spaces so that anyone can project themselves into them, find them instantly recognizable, and feel familiar in them regardless of where they might be in the world. This is also something we saw with, for example, the massive proliferation of workspaces in the mid-teens with things like WeWork. To be able to be anywhere in the world and immediately recognize a certain amount of aesthetics is in itself a kind of class signifier. But when we're thinking about the kinds of looks that really dominated this white on gray era, I'm thinking things like gray vinyl flooring, matching furniture sets, white and cream tufted headboards, silver, and mass-produced art that's generally made to be as inoffensive as possible. This is also a key aesthetic of things like house flipping, which in many cases is just a slightly less abrasive term for things like gentrification and displacement. Neutral decor is a go-to for people looking to sell their homes because the less personal a house looks, the more sellable it is. As Sharon Brown, Dallas general manager at digital real estate platform Opendoor, put it, generally going with neutral colors like shades of white, beige, taupe, and grays leads to a faster sale. Neutral colors are also more appealing to potential buyers because they may want the creative freedom of a blank canvas to add their personal touches to when looking for a new place to call home. From a seller's point of view, it can be risky having bright, bold paint colors because personal preference ranges greatly from person to person. And house flipping, buying a fixer-upper home, often after a foreclosure, investing money in upgrades, and then selling it for a profit, has become a popular means of generating income, illustrated by the popularity of reality shows like Flip or Flop. And when people flip a home, what do they do to it? They often make it white, gray, or otherwise devoid of personality so that it becomes easier to sell. The average house flipping return on investment reached 38.9% in 2021 and then dropped to a 13-year low of 25.8% in 2022. Yet the house flipping rate increased at that same time. A report published by the real estate data analytics firm Adams showed that 114,706 single-family homes and condos were flipped during the first quarter of the year, representing 9.6% of all transactions in that period, which is up from 6.9% in the fourth quarter of 2021 and 4.9% in the first quarter of 2021. So this means that more people are taking on the risk and the work of flipping homes, which in some respects can be a good thing, in the sense that usually this means investing into the existing homes rather than tearing them down to make for cheap builds, as is often the case with bigger developers. But at the same time, house flipping massively impacts things like gentrification and displacement of communities because typically a crucial part of house flipping is identifying a home in an area that's up and coming, i.e. used to be pretty inexpensive and is likely going to be massively more expensive in the coming years. From a 2017 article in Gothamist mapped house flipping in New York City by zip code for every year since 2003. Our analysis shows that the number of flips has been steadily increasing since 2011, returning to a level not seen since the collapse of the subprime mortgage industry in 2007. The Center for NYC Neighborhoods recently published a report detailing this increase in flipping and the effects that the practice can have on New York City's most affordable neighborhoods. In a place like New York City, where affordable housing is scarce, flipping removes affordable homes from the housing stock and gentrifies lower-income areas. And the expansion of overly neutral home decor beyond just house flipping is indicative of homeowners wanting to look expensive, which often ends up making every home look the same. From one Atlantic article called The HGTV-ification of America, in the hands of flippers and landlords, these choices are generally made not by people who want to fill the world with the best, safest, most comfortable homes possible, but by those looking for a return on the bets they've made on the place where you'll start your family or play with your future grandkids. They've chosen these things just as much for what they aren't as for what they are. Inoffensive, inexpensive, innocuous. These houses aren't necessarily designed to be lived in, they're designed to go into contract. Now, it should be noted that trends are cyclical, and places like Architectural Digest are already talking about the fact that there is a new sort of white chocolate minimalism that's another trend to look out for on the horizon. And I should stress that whatever your personal tastes happen to be, there is no good or bad. My taste, which tends toward more colorful and maximalist, is not going to be everyone else's, and I also understand that some of the choices I made may wax and wane with time as well in terms of popularity. However, I do think it's important when we look at the kinds of trends that we're seeing and what is considered, for example, buyable, that we're reading a little further into what these trends mean about the culture that we live in. Moving to a viewpoint of homes that sort of removes every aspect of them that makes them a home rather than just a piece of property, by making them as neutral and interchangeable as possible with absolutely zero regard to the community or history that happened to be in them before. This can also often be seen in things like removing historical flourishes, moldings, trims, stained glass, doors, basically everything that initially gave the house character. We can see some truly horrendous Victorian before and afters here. Doesn't just mean erasing architectural or decorative flourishes. It also means erasing the fact that homes are, at the end of the day, something that is meant to be lived in. Combined with the private equityization of our housing market and the extent to which it's becoming more and more difficult for the average person to even get a foothold in what used to be considered a starter home. And we can see how much this mass neutralization of our interiors points toward a larger problem. That when everything is a commodity that can just be flipped and sold on a dime, nothing is actually worth living in.
And now it's time for me to answer the 2 society questions of the video. As a reminder, click the join button below to become a member of our amazing society. You get tons of awesome perks and exclusives and bonus stuff. But you also get to ask me questions that I answer every month, like a little mailbag. What is the mail song from Blue's Clues? We just got a letter. We just got a question from our little members. Wonder what they said. Okay. Do you use any organizational apps and templates to organize your life and work? If so, would you please share? Absolutely. I am probably more organized in my personal life than I am in my work life, just because I always have a lot of things that I like doing at any given time. But I'm a very aggressive user of Google Calendar and Google Sheets. I have spreadsheets for everything in my life, and everything goes on Google Calendar. I also have a wall calendar in my kitchen that I put everything from my Google Calendar onto. That's color coded as well, because I like to just be able to look at it and see what's coming up at any given time. It's also convenient for my husband to see what we're up to. So I do that. I have my notebooks that I use. I like to do a lot of my work on pen and paper as well, like my to-do lists I typically keep in a journal. I have a dedicated journal for different things, like I use a specific journal for my home decor planning and my renovations. I use a specific journal for certain projects, like if I have a really big project I'm taking on, I'll typically dedicate its own journal to it. So yeah, I use a lot of tools to help me be organized. I also use voice notes constantly. I'm constantly just like, note to self, blah, 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 blah. And you can also use speech to text to convert those into notes that you can then upload. Yeah, I'm an organized little girl. I am, because I noticed that the more organized I became, the better my life was in every possible way. And it did not come naturally to me, I must say. It was quite an uphill battle at first, but now I can say that I'm very organized. What is something you wished more people knew or talked about with regards to starting and running your own business? Number one is that perception is everything. I think a lot of people don't put enough upfront investment in the presentation of themselves online. Like they don't have like a domain name, like a website landing page attached to their business that has all the relevant information and presents a very professional image. They don't have like email addresses attached to that website. Like it should be like hello at your website or your name at your website. It shouldn't be your business name at gmail.com. These are fairly affordable in the scale of things. They're pretty darn affordable, but it's a step that a lot of people skip, and I think it really kind of impacts them negatively for discoverability, for marketing, for reaching your audience. Like you should have all of the handles on social media for your business, even if you're not using them yet. You should protect those names so that no one can buy them and then extort you for money after to get you to pay them for it. So setting up a really coherent and easy to find and easy to navigate online presence is a step that I think does not get talked about nearly enough. Also, like we have Canva now. Like you don't even need to be, it does not need to be that fancy. I am certainly not, a designer by any means, but even I can do a lot of stuff with like Squarespace and Canva and things like that. And the other thing that no one really talks about is that it's, you may not be able to like afford therapy during it, although I would recommend it if you can afford therapy while going through the first couple of years of starting a business. But having some sort of safe space that you can regularly speak about the mental and emotional toll that it takes, I think is essential, because I think a lot of people, like the stress and anxiety and pressure and workload of starting a business in the early years can really bring out the worst in people. It can cause rifts. It can damage relationships. It can damage marriages. It can be really, really toxic. And I'm grateful that I made it through and, with pretty much my whole life intact and, having, made something that I'm proud of. But I think I could have handled a lot of things differently. And I wish I had. And I wish that I had dedicated resources to taking care of my mental health, because it is an unusually stressful time in a human being's life that I think a lot of us don't properly prepare for. That's it.
As always, guys, thank you for watching, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button and to come back every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday for new and awesome videos. Bye.